Hey, what's going on guys, Khraze here, welcome back to another Outriders video. Today let's go over some of the tips and tricks that you should probably know if you're heading into the endgame, and especially so if you already finished the main campaign and are looking to do any of these expeditions, especially solo and whatnot. So here's the thing about these expeditions: these are going to be the true endgame of Outriders. This is what you're going to be aiming for, specifically because this is going to reward you the highest gear possible, and unlike everything else, even compared to World Tier 15, will have the highest and best chances to actually drop legendary gear. And yes, that is going to be the goal for the end game. So I'm going to explain you some of the tips and tricks as you're progressing through these. Maybe you're stuck at Tier 5 or Tier 10 or wherever you are stuck. I'm going to give you some of the ideas that will help you with all of that. Of course, I'm playing with a Trickster, but some of these will also work for other classes as well. So first things first, as I've mentioned in one of the previous videos, probably the best stat you should be looking for, especially on armor, is going to be bonus firepower. The reason for that is because you can get a huge amount of bonus damage increase from this and then use other mods, abilities and passives to boost up your survivability. Simply because in the end game and on the higher difficulties, you're going to still want to have that DPS, otherwise you're not going to clear out anything. No matter how tanky you are, no matter how much HP or armor you might have, you're never going to clear as efficiently as you would with high damage. And on top of that, we also have the fact that every single class in the game is heavily incentivized to kill in order to survive, so that is why DPS is king in this game. Now, on top of these, you might be looking for something different in terms of stats depending on your character and class, but usually it's a combination between close range damage and cooldown reduction, maybe with a small mix of armor pierce, or even more important, something like weapon crit damage on top if we were to talk about the weapon damage. So crit damage in that case would definitely help way more. But here is what mods work best, and of course tier 2 are the ones that I'm going to cover first, and you should definitely aim to have all of these unlocked before trying to go into any of these expeditions if you want to fare well. Now, one of the first that I always recommended if you were to go against some of these enemies is something that is called stare into the barrel. Reason being is that this is one of the best firepower increases. It gives you a few thousands for each of the enemies in close range, up to 5 times stack. So this means that you get those 5 stacks, and since you're going to constantly be surrounded by enemies, there's no situation in which this isn't going to be useful. But this is going to be a tier 3 kind of mod, so you might want to first acquire some legendary gear that hopefully has it on it and then dismantle it to put it on something else. Now, if you don't have any of that, then there are tier 2 alternatives, and one that comes to mind that actually I'm also using with this build is the Bloodlust right here in the tier 2 category, which makes killing shots to increase your firepower by quite a significant margin, way higher than the previous one, but it also stacks to 3 times, though again it's pretty much going to compensate your lack of that tier 3 mod instead. It also only lasts for 10 seconds, but since you're going to be constantly killing enemies, you're constantly going to run with Bloodlust anyway. So between the Bloodlust and the stare into the barrel, you're going to get like at least 10,000 and even more at eye level 50 in firepower, essentially increasing your firepower by at least 50% to what you currently have from all of the other sources. So that is going to be a really awesome one. But as I've said, you shouldn't keep all of your points into weapon damage, because you're going to also want to survive, or at least when you're struggling and when you're surrounded by enemies, you might want to have additional ways to get over that. So one tier 2 mod that works extremely well with that is going to be mitigation from death. Killing enemies while aiming down sights grants 20,000 points of armor for 10 seconds, stacks up to 3 times, so that would be 60,000 in this case. So I also want to talk a bit about the armor, because right now a lot of people might be stacking a little bit too much without knowing that it actually has a hard cap of about 85%. So let me show you one really cool example where you could use either this ability or tier 1 mods that might make your armor increase just as much, and it's way easier to get. In this case, the example is with the borrowed time, and specifically the one that I'm looking for is going to be the time space protection. When you activate the skill, it gives you, guess what, 60,000 armor, but it also gives you that 30% resistance bonus on top. So let me just give you this example right here with the borrowed time. So right now my armor is only 27k, which reduces only 48% of the physical incoming damage. So if I activate this cool ability, it increases that to 93,000, or a physical damage reduction of 76%. So essentially I'm less than 10% beneath the cap. Now let me show you what would happen if, for example, I were to activate a mod similar to mitigation from death. So let's say you don't have the mitigation, let's say you go with a tier 1 mod. Well, there is one really awesome alternative right here for all of your tricksters, but there should be something similar for other classes as well, and one of them is armor of eons. Again, just tier 1, but it works wonders, essentially increasing your armor by another 100%. In this case I will be way over the cap, by the way, but I still want to show you that it's possible. So activating the skill, bam, all the way up to 85% physical damage reduction, which is going to help you tremendously in combat. So definitely super useful with that. Now as far as damage goes, here is where it becomes interesting, because damage is going to be what you want, and I'm going to focus on the weapons for that. So this build right here, as I've said previously, is going to have twisted rounds activated all the time, because we're going to constantly replenish our ammo. So this is how you're going to do that. Essentially it falls down to only one mod, which is going to be Perpetuum Mobile. So essentially you instantly replenish your magazine if you kill an enemy with 35% or less ammo remaining in your magazine. And guess what? It's not a reload, it's a replenish. So this means since it doesn't count as a reload, you're essentially never reloading your weapon, so you're keeping twisted rounds forever as long as you just kill at least one enemy with 35% or less ammo remaining in your inventory. Now since this is my AoE damage weapon, I'm using an automatic shotgun, which I find to be some of the best weapons in the game. So Bone Shrapnel would work the best for AoE damage. Just at 43 eye level, it already provides over 44,000 in damage. It also applies a bleed, it also works every single second, and this means everything pops when it stays close to one another. And yes, they all pop together and they all provide this damage together, so it kind of has a chain reaction that helps you a ton with that. There's many others that you can use in there. Now if you want to go specifically for some better mods out there, then I would suggest to have at least one type of ability or mod or weapon that can at least freeze or incapacitate an enemy at least momentarily. For me that would be the Wicker, which already came with Ashen Bullets, and I'd used a Storm Whip on it, but honestly I would use something different on that, a different tier 3 mod that is even more insane, which would be the Dark Sacrifice. It sacrifices your health, as in it drains it constantly, but it increases your weapon damage by 75%. So if you're using a different weapon for single target damage, then you might want to go with the Dark Sacrifice and have that instead, since it's going to absolutely annihilate everything in sight. Now as far as the skill build goes, it's pretty simple. It heavily emphasizes cooldown reduction for my abilities and huge weapon damage increase, so for that Assassination is going to be the best. Specifically, you have Disruptive Firepower combined with Outrider Executioner, so you can start with a movement skill which increases your weapon damage by 50% for 8 seconds, then you pop something like a Bubble or a Venator's Knife, which increases your weapon damage by another 50% for 8 seconds, so that might be like 100% damage increase in total. And then we also have the last one, Cold Calculation, further increases your weapon damage for each enemy in close range by up to 8%. So if there's 10 enemies around you, that's another 80% right there. Of course, along the way, auto resummation for that 50% magazine size increase. It helps a lot with the twisted rounds as well. And everything else on top is weapon damage or close weapon damage. Of course, I'm also using these cooldown reductions, especially on the movement skills. So equilibrium right here is going to help you quite a ton with that, and of course again weapon damage all the way. And because I mostly prefer shotguns, you will also see a bunch of shotgun providing damage increases right here. So 30, like what, 27% increase between the Shotgun Adept and the Shotgun Master, which is going to help you a ton. So yeah, this is pretty much it on how you would progress through these expeditions. As I've said previously, you're going to want to make buy as much as possible as you transition from one level to another, and unfortunately it is going to be a bit of a chore. It is going to be difficult. You're going to have to do a lot of tries, but eventually you're going to reach that point in no time. This is it. Thanks so much for watching, and I'll see you guys in the next one.